Hello everyone, my name is Tanner Babcock. I'm going to be talking a little bit about why I use Linux and why I think other people should use Linux too. I'm going to get started here and talk about the free software movement. The free software movement started in the 80s, and there are a number of licenses that were written for the various software people can install on their computers. One of the most popular of those licenses is called the GNU General Public License. You also have the MIT license, the BSD license, and the Apache license. Now, these are legally binding documents that come with the source code for all of this software, and it guarantees the users of these software three things: the right to acquire and view the source code for these programs, the right to modify or change that source code, and also the right to distribute their modified source code for these programs. These are the three basic rights protected in the GNU GPL. The difference between the GNU GPL and the MIT or the BSD is that the GPL requires that any forked or derived works must also be distributed with the GNU General Public License. This is the foundation of the free software movement. I think it's rooted in socialism a little bit, because it's all about the community and the common good, but it's rooted in a lot of ideals like that. So even to this day, you can go to GitHub. GitHub tells you the license for anything, and if it's a serious project, it will have, probably an open source license if it's on GitHub. So now, what this is great. This is a great thing that some programmers a long time ago decided. They were going to distribute their programs this way, and they were going to work on each other's programs this way. And these licenses make collaboration easy. They make working together easy. And so, people can build better software, better tools together. Now, if you run Linux as opposed to using Windows 11 or Mac OS, you can change anything on your whole system. Actually anything. You could change the display manager, you could change the desktop environment, you could have a window manager instead of a desktop environment. You get to choose your status bar, you get to choose anything you want to put on your desktop. You can choose your file manager, your media player. These are all choices that you can make. GNU Linux distributions, like Ubuntu or Debian, Fedora, Arch, Manjaro, these distributions come with default software that the distro thinks that the users should use. But every Linux user is free to get rid of this default software and install whatever they want. And every Linux distribution is basically the same as far as software compatibility. So, if one program is running fine on one distro, that means it'll run on every distro, pretty much. You have the freedom of choice. You have the freedom to choose exactly what distro you want to run, exactly what you want to install on your hardware that you paid money for. You can change absolutely anything, not just the wallpapers, not just the colors. You can actually change the source code for these programs and change the way these programs work if you really wanted to. And you could publish those programs again. I think that's pretty great, because with Windows and Mac OS, you can't really do anything about the user interface. You can't do anything about the taskbar or the dock or the program launchers or how the desktop works or things like that. I think they let you pick the colors now, and Mac OS finally has a dark mode. So that's about all the choice those operating systems allow their users to make, though. So yeah, the ability to change anything whenever you want to change it is pretty great. I think it's a pretty great thing for an operating system. I think the users of technology should have more access to that technology, and they should be more informed about the software that's running on their property that they paid for. And if you install a proprietary commercial operating system, you just don't know at the end of the day. There could be spyware, there could be telemetry. Windows 11 has ads in the file browser now. There could be all kinds of things, and you just wouldn't know because it's a commercial product and you're not allowed to look at the source code. The source code is their property. That's not free software, it's proprietary software. Free software is not just free as in there's no cost, you don't have to pay for it, it's also free as in freedom. Always remember that. But this privacy stuff is getting out of control. With Windows 10, especially Windows 11, and the new releases of Mac OS, all of the only thing these operating systems do with their users is spy on them, milk them for data to sell to advertisers. They're constantly phoning home and sending everything about their users, from their faces to their voices to their Google search histories to their any website they look at. All of this information is being recorded and sent to Microsoft servers or Google servers or Apple servers. And there's nothing the users can really do about it. I mean, if Microsoft or Apple doesn't want the users to do anything about it, then they're not going to be able to do anything about it. And so, this becomes kind of a hostage situation. You want to escape the perils of capitalism and the limitations and restraints that these non-free operating systems, impose on people. And that's why Linux is so great, is it offers, a way out, a way to get out of the matrix, out of the botnet, so you don't have to worry so much. I mean, you still have to worry a little bit, Nothing's ever completely gone forever on the internet. But a great thing about GNU/Linux is the privacy, is the, solitude, really, is the lack of intrusive stuff that's getting thrown in your face. No one wants to look at ads. No one wants to feel like they're being spied on. No one wants to, work with software. They don't know what it's doing. They don't know how it works. They don't know what information is being collected about them. It's a violation of people's rights, really. People should have the right to privacy, and that's what GNU Linux is about. If you use GNU Linux with an encrypted hard drive or encrypted solid-state drive like I have, that's another layer of security. If you want to use a VPN, pay for a VPN, that's another layer of security or anonymity. And you can use these things to still use the internet, to still use apps in 2022 without having to deal with all the bullshit that goes with it. Because I know Windows users and Mac users, they don't like this stuff. They don't like that their operating systems do this. I hear them complain about it all the time. Oh, it works like this now. I don't like that it works like this. But, these users, they don't really know that they can do something about it. They can't really do much about it if they keep using Windows or Mac OS. They're kind of stuck. But it doesn't occur to them that there's a third choice, a third option, where they don't have to worry about all this evil stuff, all of this evil spying and capitalism and such. So no ads, no viruses, no phoning home, no spyware, no ransomware. So now Linux is great, right? What is Linux though? I mean, people know Linux as an operating system, as an alternative to Windows and Mac OS, and they go, oh yeah, I see the penguin. That's Linux. But what is it? You might have noticed I've been calling this operating system GNU Linux or GNU/Linux, throughout this video. And that is the official name of the operating system. That is what this operating system is actually called. So if you install Ubuntu, the full name is Ubuntu GNU/Linux. Because the Linux kernel is just a kernel. It is just the core layer between the operating system and the hardware itself. The Linux kernel supports all kinds of hardware, all kinds of devices from a huge selection of manufacturers. It's just, especially compared to 10 years ago, to 15 years ago, Linux works on basically everything. People have Linux in their phones. You open up Facebook or YouTube or whatever, those web servers are running Linux. And then there's people like me who use GNU Linux for their desktop operating system. But Linux is just a kernel. It's not a complete operating system by itself. That's where GNU comes in. GNU is an acronym for GNU's Not Unix. And this was a group, a free software group from the 80s that started making an alternative to Unix, a free and open source clone of the proprietary Unix operating system that was owned by AT&T. The most famous thing this GNU project did was the core utils. And what the core utils are, if you have access to a Linux machine or a Mac OS machine, the GNU core utils are these commands. You type ls, it tells you, lists the files in the directory. You type pwd, you type df, you type date, you type uname a. These are the GNU core utils that have been included with every Unix-like operating system since the late 70s and 80s. That's when the free software movement and the Free Software Foundation was established in the 80s. So what is Unix now? What's the difference between Linux and Unix, or GNU/Linux, and the original Unix? The original Unix was developed by Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie, and Brian Kernighan in 1969 at Bell Labs. This was a commercial product sold to people by AT&T. This operating system was for computers that were huge, because in those days computers took up the size of an entire room. And they had this thing called Unix. It rose from the shambles of the failed project Multics. And Unix was a hit. It worked on, numerous kinds of computers. It was ported over to different hardware. There were multiple versions of Unix, System 5, 6, 7. And eventually there was a fork, a free software fork or clone of the original Unix called BSD, and another one called GNU. BSD is how you get free BSD and open BSD. It's also how you get Mac OS, which is a Unix-like operating system, but it's not a free and open source operating system like Unix is. So that's what GNU is. It's kind of hard to explain, and it's kind of hard to, sit down with someone and explain, well, what is Linux? That's a complicated answer because you have to get into the history of Linux. And that's what I was hoping to do with this video, is sort of explain to people, what Linux is, why I think everyone should use Linux, why I think, it's a great thing. Linux, GNU Linux is really the most popular operating system in the world. If you count all of the web servers out there that run GNU Linux and all of the smartphones running Android in people's pockets. You also have the Google project, their Chromebook, the Chrome OS is actually based on Gentoo, GNU Linux. So, this is a little confusing. How can Google, this huge corporation, incorporate this open source project into their commercial product? Well, that's just how things work. Android operating system, I bet it says open source somewhere, but that mobile operating system is not completely open source. It is not completely free software. It just has elements that are free software. The Linux kernel came out in 1991. It was created by Linus Torvalds. It only ran on a very specific kind of computer. And over the years, many people have adopted it. People have combined the Linux kernel with the GNU core utils, and that's where you get what we have today. That's where you get these Linux distributions. That's where you get Android and Chrome OS. So really, all of these great things we have today can be traced back to 1969 with Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie, and Brian Kernighan. It's a very complicated answer, but Linux is complicated. I think it's great. I think it's rewarding. I think it forces people to really learn about computers and really learn how their computer works and learn, what all they can do with their operating system. I think everyone should install Linux. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Tanner Babcock. This has been a video.